They say Rome fell, but look around, its shadow never left. From the carefully scripted speeches of the Senate, to the marble facades of modern power, to the myths we still believe about freedom and democracy. SPQR once stood for the people, but it was a symbol crafted by Rome's elite to control them. And as we trace the entire history of the Roman Empire, one disturbing pattern emerges. What began as an illusion of representation became an empire dressed as a republic. And today, that illusion might be alive and well. Because the architecture of Roman power, the Senate, the rituals, the propaganda, didn't vanish. It migrated, it modernized, and it may still be ruling us under a different name. This is not just a story about ancient history. This is a mirror. Welcome to Shadows of Ancient History, where forgotten empires whisper through the present and the past refuses to stay buried. The letters SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus, stood for the Senate and people of Rome. You'll see them etched on broken ruins, fluttering on imperial standards, even inked on the forearms of modern-day idealists. But the myth of representation these four letters proclaimed was not as solid as the marble beneath them. In theory, SPQR meant Rome was a republic, a government, by the people through elected senators with the voice of the plebs shaping policy. But the practice much murkier. Rome's Senate was never truly open. It was a patrician stronghold, an elite circle of landowners and aristocrats who kept the mechanisms of power greased within their own networks. The popular assemblies did exist, but votes were weighted by wealth. The poorest citizens, though technically enfranchised, had little real influence. And who counted the votes? The elite. Yet SPQR worked, not because it was true, but because it was believed. It gave Rome a symbolic democracy, one that allowed conquest to be justified as a civilizing mission rather than raw domination. When Roman generals marched legions across foreign soil, they didn't claim to expand an empire. They said they were bringing Roman law. They said they were freeing people from tyranny. Historians still debate whether the Roman Republic ever truly functioned as a democracy. Some argue it was simply oligarchy in disguise, a system dressed in civic virtue, but drunk on aristocratic control. Others maintain there were moments rare and flickering when the people briefly held the reins. But even those flashes were often sparked by crisis, then quickly extinguished when the patricians reasserted dominance. Take the conflict of the orders. In the early Republic, plebeians fought for basic rights like protection from arbitrary arrest or access to public office. The result, the 12 Tables. Rome's first code of law and the creation of the office of tribune meant to protect the common people. But even these gains were filtered through elite control. Tribunes could be bribed, laws could be selectively enforced. And as Rome expanded and wealth flooded in, the gap between elite and commoner widened into a canyon. The people were still invoked in public speeches, but increasingly ignored in private decisions. There was, however, one brilliant innovation: clientelism. Roman elites would adopt networks of poorer citizens as clients, offering favors, food, legal help, and in return securing loyalty at the ballot box. It was democracy by dependency, and it worked frighteningly well. By the 2nd century BCE, the Republic had become a playground for ambitious men who mastered this system. None more so than the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius. Born of noble blood but champions of the poor, they dared to challenge the Senate's stranglehold by pushing for land reforms. Tiberius was clubbed to death, Gaius was hunted down, and their blood painted the steps of Roman politics for generations. Still, the illusion of SPQR remained. It was painted on standards, stamped on coins, and shouted in processions. The phrase lived on not because it was practiced, but because it was useful. As long as the people thought they had a voice, the system could operate without their consent. One of the strangest events from this era, the practice of cursus honorum, a strict ladder of political advancement. In theory, any male citizen could climb it from lowly quaestor to lofty consul, but in practice, only a handful of families dominated. A recent archaeological discovery in Pompeii even revealed graffiti encouraging a baker's son to run for office, a rare flicker of populist hope in an otherwise closed game. By the late Republic, corruption had become ritual. Bribes decided elections. Senators auctioned off military commands. And yet SPQR still fluttered on every standard. The people still cheered. The illusion held. Because Rome didn't just conquer with swords, it conquered with symbols. And SPQR was its crown jewel. It told the story Rome wanted the world to believe that it was a city of laws, not men, that it was ruled by consensus, not ambition, that it stood for the people even as it crushed them beneath debt war and political theater. But underneath, the marble cracks were spreading, and soon the illusion would face its greatest test. A name was rising in the East, a name that would change everything. That name was Julius Caesar, and with a single irreversible step, he shattered the myth. Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BCE, not just a river, but a line of no return. He came not as a conqueror of foreign lands, but as a Roman general marching on Rome itself. The act was technically treason, but Caesar wasn't concerned with legalities. He had already learned what SPQR truly meant. The Senate, that ancient body said to represent the Roman people, was fracturing. Rival factions competed for dominance, the conservative optimates guarding aristocratic privilege, and the populist populares who claimed to champion the common man. Caesar aligned himself with the latter, but with his own twist. He was a master of symbolism. He held triumphs so grand they bent the sky. He paraded war elephants and golden chariots, distributed coinage with his own likeness, and sent grain to the masses with stamped slogans, "Caesar, friend of the people." SPQR still flew beside his standards, but the people knew whose name mattered more. After defeating Pompey's forces at Pharsalus and pursuing his remaining rivals across the provinces, Caesar consolidated control and was eventually named dictator for life in 44 BCE. The title sent shockwaves through Rome. Dictatorship was a temporary emergency role meant to last 6 months, not eternity. His new power threatened the entire Republican order. And so on the Ides of March, he was murdered. But his death didn't save the Republic. In fact, it broke it beyond repair. What followed was a strange dance, Rome clinging to the ghost of SPQR even as it slid into empire. Augustus Caesar's adopted heir understood this better than anyone. He didn't abolish the Senate, he honored it. He didn't erase SPQR, he enshrined it. But behind the scenes, he wielded Imperium Maius' greater authority than any magistrate. Augustus called himself Princeps First Citizen, not Emperor. It was clever stagecraft. The Republic he claimed still lived. The Senate still met. Laws were still passed, but no decision moved without him. The machinery of democracy remained intact, yet its levers were now pulled by one man. Historians still debate whether Augustus saved Rome or merely embalmed it. Some praise his reforms. He ended civil wars, restored infrastructure, and initiated the Pax Romana, a 200-year peace. Others argue he was the architect of illusion, building a golden mask to hide autocracy. Under Augustus, SPQR took on new life. It adorned temples, military banners, and marble arches. But now it served the emperor. A brilliant example lies in the Arapacis, the altar of peace. Commissioned by Augustus, it depicts a calm, ordered procession of senators and citizens, an idealized vision of Roman unity. But every face is a stage mask. The emperor's family stands at the center. One lesser-known event from Augustus's reign was the Lex Julia de Maritandis, Ordinibus, enacted in 18 BCE as part of a broader set of social reforms, a law passed to encourage Roman elites to marry and have children. Augustus feared declining birth rates among nobles would weaken the empire, so he turned family planning into law. Unmarried men were penalized. Widows had 2 years to remarry. SPQR stood behind these laws not as a democratic consensus, but as an imperial decree draped in republican robes. Over the next centuries, this balancing act continued. Emperors were deified, statues multiplied, but always SPQR was there, etched beneath feet, floating above heads. It gave legitimacy to military conquest, domestic policy, and even divine claims. But cracks kept growing. Caligula declared war on Neptune and ordered his troops to collect seashells as spoils. Nero fiddled as Rome burned and blamed the Christians. Commodus fought in the Colosseum for applause. The Senate still met, but their power was ceremonial at best. Still, the illusion persisted. Rome's greatest conquest was not land, it was perception. The Republic had died. Yet through careful language, symbolic continuity, and fear, it seemed alive. And this deception had consequences. For if power can be masked, if autocracy can wear the face of the people, then tyranny can come dressed as patriotism. The later empire would become a swirling mass of bureaucracy and imperial cults and collapsing borders. But even as emperors fell and Rome split east and west, SPQR remained a fading ghost painted on crumbling walls. It was during this era that one final bizarre twist occurred. Elagabalus, named after the Syrian sun god Elagabal, whom he worshipped, was crowned at age 14 in the 3rd century CE. He tried to elevate this deity above Jupiter and impose foreign rituals on Rome's elite. He built a lavish temple, forced senators to attend foreign rituals, and even tried to merge Roman religion with Eastern mysticism. The Senate grumbled, but obeyed. SPQR still fluttered empty, silent, hollow. By the 5th century, Rome was fallen. Barbarians breached its gates. The Western Empire crumbled. And yet in Constantinople and distant provinces, officials still used the old symbols. Bureaucrats signed letters in the name of SPQR. The shell remained even as the body decayed. The dream of Roman democracy had ended long ago, but its language lived on, adapted, rebranded, and repurposed. Which raises a question. When a republic dies, but its symbols survive, what comes next? Let's move forward. Let's follow the ghost. Let's ask what happens when SPQR crosses the ocean. Centuries passed. Rome was no more. Its Western Empire fractured into memory, its Eastern twin absorbed by rising powers. But SPQR didn't vanish. It merely drifted into church banners, Renaissance frescoes, and revolutionary minds. And then across the Atlantic, something strange happened. A new republic was born. The United States of America, in its architecture, philosophy, and political structure, resurrected much of Rome, not just its marble dreams, but its mechanisms of control. Washington, D.C. stands today like a Latin echo chamber, domes, columns, arches, and a Senate chamber straight from Cicero's ghost. But the resemblance runs deeper than stone. The founding fathers admired Rome. Thomas Jefferson collected Latin texts. John Adams warned of Caesarism. The Federalist Papers referenced Roman history more than English common law. And when the Constitution was crafted, it carried a distinctly Roman fingerprint. A republic, a senate, a system of checks and balances. A fear of monarchy. It was no accident. The United States inherited the Roman model, but with new language. Instead of SPQR, there was we the people. Instead of consuls, there was a president, but the structure, familiar. 2 legislative bodies, veto powers, tribunes in spirit if not in name. But just like Rome, America had its shadows. Senators today are not aristocrats by birth, but they are often elites by wealth, legacy, and influence. Political dynasties rise like patrician families. Super PACs replace Roman patronage networks. Lobbyists move legislation, not unlike the Roman clientes whispering to their patrons. Historians still debate whether America is a true republic or a modern oligarchy. Princeton researchers once argued the U.S. functions more like a system where elite interests outweigh popular will, echoes of the Roman Senate's control masked by popular assemblies. And then there's the spectacle. In ancient Rome, the ludi public games served as a pressure valve. Gladiators' chariot races, theatrical performances, all offered to distract, appease, and control the masses. Bred in circuses, today the circus is digital. The arenas are televised, scandals, debates, political theater, all orchestrated for mass consumption. One might say SPQR has evolved its control now psychological rather than physical, yet symbols persist. The American eagle inspired by the Roman aquila, the imperial standard, the Latin motto E pluribus unum. Out of many, one could sit comfortably beside SPQR on a bronze shield. The Capitol itself, its very name, is borrowed from Capitoline Hill, the Sacred Heart of Rome. But here's where the mirror darkens. Like the late Roman Republic, the US faces deep polarization. Competing visions of justice, internal gridlock, an expanding executive branch. Critics speak of imperial presidencies where foreign wars are declared without formal congressional votes, and surveillance states grow beneath a banner of security. One lesser-known but telling parallel, the Senatus Consultum be Ultimum, a declaration passed in late Republican Rome, allowing consuls to do whatever necessary to protect the state. It was used to justify political purges, assassinations, and suspensions of rights. A similar rationale underpins modern emergency powers invoked in crises both foreign and domestic. And the people, just like Rome's plebeians, modern citizens still vote, still protest, still believe in the Republic. But are they shaping policy or responding to pre-selected options? Is representation real or ritual? A curious episode unfolded during the post-9/11 era. The Capitol's architecture remained unchanged, but its internal culture shifted. Secrecy increased. Surveillance expanded. The language of security began to override the language of liberty. SPQR didn't disappear. It adapted. It went invisible. Even the use of martial symbolism endures. Military parades, flag salutes, oaths of allegiance. These rituals echo Roman pageantry designed to unify, inspire, and sometimes suppress dissent. Yet perhaps the strangest reflection lies in America's own empire, not one declared, but one maintained. Over 750 U.S. military installations span the globe, a footprint unmatched in modern history. Trade routes are guarded, foreign governments influenced, sanctions wielded like legions, and all without using the word empire. Much like Rome claimed to defend allies, America claims to spread democracy. But what happens when democracy becomes a brand? When SPQR becomes not just a symbol, but a script, a system where freedom is professed, yet surveillance is normalized, where representation is declared, yet policy is shaped by a few. To many observers, the Republic lives only as performance. There's no dictator crossing the Rubicon, no Senate stabbing at Caesar, no emperor raising his golden standard. But perhaps the mechanisms are subtler now, the illusions smoother, the rituals more digital, more palatable. Still beneath the screen light, in sound bites, the same old questions linger. Who really governs? Where does power live? And how much of today's republic is just yesterday's empire rewrapped in modern robes? One modern political theorist called it managed democracy. Another called it inverted totalitarianism. Neither used the word SPQR, but they could have. Because even now, in a marble-domed capital far from the Tiber, the ghost of Rome walks the halls. If history has a sense of irony, it may be this, that the very republic founded to escape empire would come to mirror one. As America expanded west in the 19th century, some called it manifest destiny, but the language civilization law order was eerily familiar. Roman generals once said the same as they marched into Gaul and Britannia, that they were not conquerors, but bringers of justice. Julius Caesar's own dispatches claimed he was liberating the tribes. The cost, of course, was their sovereignty. In the 21st century, America projects power not just through armies, but through institutions, global finance, tech monopolies, cultural dominance, fast food chains on ancient streets, Hollywood myths in every language, algorithms predicting behavior on a planetary scale, and yet it still calls itself a republic, just as Rome did. But is the United States a republic in substance or in symbol? In Rome, the emperor eventually overshadowed the Senate. Titles remained, rituals continued, but real authority centralized. Over time, emperors became divine. Portraits, statues, coins, all served to reinforce a single image, worship disguised as patriotism. Now consider today's presidency. It begins with oaths, continues with ceremonies, ends with motorcades and televised speeches. Citizens wear flags, chant slogans, rally at arenas. Social media has turned leaders into icons, pixelated emperors. Their words move markets, their moods shift nations. Historians still debate whether this evolution is natural or dangerous. Some argue that concentrated leadership is necessary in an age of speed and complexity. Others warn that symbolism has outpaced substance, that democracy may now be an aesthetic more than a mechanism. And what of the Senate? In Rome's final days, the Senate still issued decrees, still held debates, but its voice had become hollow. It ratified what emperors had already decided. A scholar once described it as a theater of consent. Some fear the same fate for modern legislatures, where gridlock stalls policy and corporate lobbying steers outcomes. One lesser-known mirror between old and new lies in citizenship itself. In Rome, the Edict of Caracalla in 212 CE extended citizenship to all free men in the empire. On paper, it was inclusion. In practice, it expanded the tax base. Rights were given, but obligations too. Today, citizenship is likewise complex, promises of rights. But surveillance debt and digital dependency have carved out new kinds of submission. And then there's the spectacle of crisis. Rome often used emergencies to justify expanding authority. Fires, rebellions, plagues. Each time new powers were seized, temporary became permanent. Modern governments too respond to crisis with speed, but rarely reverse course when the crisis fades. Emergency declarations linger. Agencies expand. Freedoms narrow subtly, all while symbols remind citizens they are free. So where does this leave us? Perhaps with a haunting symmetry. Rome did not fall in a single night. It unraveled through overextension, internal decay, and illusion. Borders stretched thin, currency devalued, trust eroded. But the pageantry continued. The eagle still flew. SPQR still adorned arches. It is said that the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, often considered the last Western Roman emperor, was deposed in 476 CE by Odoacer. So politically irrelevant was he by then that no blood was shed. He was quietly sent into retirement. Could such a quiet ending repeat? Could an empire fade not with flames but with distraction? We scroll, we tweet, we pledge allegiance, but we also question, doubt, withdraw. The civic body weakens when its soul is tired, and yet perhaps there is hope in recognition. Unlike the citizens of late Rome, we have hindsight, we have history. We know how symbols can be used to mask decay or to ignite reform. SPQR still rules in many ways, not as a Roman institution, but as a pattern, a blueprint, a warning, and perhaps a choice. Because empires don't just fall, they transform, they migrate, they rebrand. The Roman eagle flies still not on banners, but on policies, markets, doctrines, and screens. And if we don't see it, it's not because it's gone. It's because it's evolved. And as the marble whispers fade, one question remains. Are we living in a republic or merely beneath its echo? Time erodes stone, but not patterns. Rome's grandeur lies in ruins, now pillars cracked, forms, silent standards faded. But its systems, its language, its illusions live on. Not in Rome, not even in Italy, but across oceans, across screens, within minds. The ghost of SPQR does not rattle chains. It whispers softly through symbols, structures, traditions we inherit without questioning. Through Senate chambers and marble steps, eagle crests and Latin mottos, terms like citizen republic and liberty. But symbols are not truth. They are masks. And the question is not whether we wear them, but whether we see them. Those who study the entire history of the Roman Empire know this, that power is patient. That empire often hides in plain sight. That democracy, if not vigilantly protected, becomes performance, an echo of freedom rather than its substance. Still, all is not lost. History is not a script. We are not doomed to replay its acts. If we listen closely, if we notice the patterns, hear the quiet footsteps of old mechanisms returning in new form, then perhaps we can choose differently. Perhaps the echo doesn't have to be a prophecy. Perhaps it can be a warning, or even a call. So as you leave this story and return to your own city, walk its streets, pass its monuments, listen to its speeches, remember, the Republic is not marble. It is not slogans. It is not symbols. It is us. And it is always, always just one illusion away from slipping into empire.